Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to this second episode of the extensive item guide. Today we're doing the vitality items. There's a lot to talk about here, so we're just going to start at the top, just like we did with the first episode with weapons. If you haven't watched that already, make sure to watch that too, or I will be very angry, and don't forget to subscribe. Okay, so first we have Entering Spirit. This is an item that, like it says, increases spirit lifesteal and spirit power. It's like a mini version of spirit lifesteal. It's very common to buy on heroes. Like actually, almost any hero can literally buy this because the thing about the laning stage is that green items are extremely powerful. So if you have someone like Infernus, for instance, who does afterburn on the enemies, then every time he afterburns, it's gonna give you some health back with this one. So this is an item that a lot of people keep for quite a long time, because even later on when you're building more powerful items with spirit power and spirit lifesteal, this item still helps. So it might be one of the last green items you sell, and is pretty much good on any hero that is focusing on spirit power, which is most of them. Second of all, you have extra health. This item doesn't just increase your health by 160. You also have to remember the 11% base health that you get for just using a tier 1 green item. And this is where like you have to determine what your matchup is. If you are playing against a matchup that has very high burst damage, like say like Lash for instance, or some sort of stun combo like Wraith ult and cards, then extra health could stop you from getting one shot or bursted from full HP. However, it does not give you an extra sustain in the lane, which is something that's really important because you're going to notice that you're constantly going to be poking the enemy and they're constantly going to be poking you back because this game has no mana. The spells only have cooldowns. So you should be spamming your spells to provide pressure on the enemies so that it's easier for you to get last hits and it's harder for them. And that is why in a lot of cases I buy this one, Extra Regen. It increases your health regen by 2.8 per second, and that is a lot because I'm pretty sure that most heroes, they start with something like 2 or 1.5 or 3. See that? So with one 500 item, you essentially double or triple your health regeneration in the laning stage. And it still gives you 8% ammo too, which also helps you avoid having to reload while last hitting. Next up, we have extra stamina. This item is really good, especially for here. There are some heroes that only have 2 stamina bars, like McGinnis and Vindicta. And in those cases, this is pretty much a must buy. Stamina is what you need to do dashing and double jumping. And it also increases the recovery of your stamina and later on builds into superior stamina, which is one of the most insane items in the game. So this is not necessarily an item you buy super early. Maybe you still get regen first, but that depends because it's also really nice to have 2 jump dashes in a row in the lane for most heroes. So you can definitely get out of a lot more stuff. A melee lifesteal. This item is a lot more situational. It's not necessarily something you buy on every hero, but it's very common on Abrams. It's very common on Bebop. Bebop's uppercut is considered a light melee, and same goes for Viscous as well. So all those heroes have great benefits of buying melee lifesteal. And later on, it builds into Life Strike, which is another really strong item, which is why Abrams is ruining a lot of your games. And then we have Sprint Boots. This is an item I really like to use in the laning stage because sometimes you're simply running back and forth between jungle camps and the lane, or running back from the shop to the lane. It gives you some health regen, which helps you get some sustain in the lane. And later on, it also just makes you rotate between lanes faster to help ganking. It also upgrades into Entering Speed, which is an item that is almost a must-buy on all the heroes I play at least. Of course, it's situational, but I just love move speed. I love being able to traverse the map really quickly, and I feel like I can help my team a lot more by being able to rotate faster, and I'm able to also farm faster. That's why, in a lot of cases, I go for movement speed over more survivability. And then we have Healing Right. This is an extremely strong item that is very common to buy in the laning stage. And I'll give you guys one very important tip here. Sometimes, if you're low HP and you have 500 souls, then instead of flying back to base on the zip line, you can buy Healing Right. And now you might ask yourself, okay, but now I'm using 500 souls. But here's the thing. Not only will you sell this later and get 250 of it back, meaning that it was only a 250 souls investment. Second of all, how many last hits did you miss if you went back to the base instead of just popping a Healing Right in the lane and then go straight back to last hitting straight away. And then the last one that is also often overlooked is that there are breakpoints of how many souls you've gathered for where you get ability points. When you've collected 500 souls, you get your second ability. When you've collected 1500 souls, you get your third ability. When you've collected 3000 souls, you get your ultimate ability. In other words, even though you're spending 500 souls on healing right, this allows you to reach those ability breakpoints faster because you're not going back to base and then losing out on those souls. So I have started always buying healing right if I'm low HP and I have 500 souls available, simply to avoid ziplining back to base. There are certain exceptions, like if you have speed boost available on the zipline, you can probably get back and forth without losing too much. But as a general rule of thumb, this is a great item to buy if you're behind in the lane and you don't want to miss out on souls. One thing to bear in mind, by the way, with this item is that you can cast it on enemies. It also upgrades to Rescue Beam, which is very common on support heroes. And it gets interrupted by hero damage, but not NPC damage. So if you're jungling and need sustain, you can also use this item and it will heal you while you're taking damage from jungle creeps. Okay, category 2, bullet armor. This item is one of the most bought items in the game. Essentially, whenever you are playing against a team, you want to check what damage you're taking most of. So for instance, there's two ways of doing this. One of them is simply when you die, you have an incoming damage bar on the right. You can select either last life or you can select last 10 minutes and you can see what percentage of bullet and spirit damage you've taken. It is very important though that you make sure that you read it thoroughly, because sometimes if you've been jungling a lot, they only do bullet damage. So then you can sometimes wrongly believe that you're taking more bullet damage in teamfights than you actually are, because a lot of that bullet damage was taken from jungle camps. Another great way of doing this is to simply press tab and you can see what kind of items your enemies are focusing on. Because when you press tab, there are 3 bars, a green and an orange and a purple bar at the top of each player. And you can see if they have a giant spirit bar, then you're more likely to want to focus heavily on spirit armor. So that is a way of predicting what type of damage you're going to take. It also upgrades to improved bullet armor, which essentially just does the same but better and is more expensive. Late game, most heroes will have either 2 or 1 of these. Bullet lifesteal. This is an item that gives you a lot of sustain. It's bought on a lot of carries like Haze and Wraith, and if you play a weapon bebop, if you play, honestly, any hero that deals a lot of damage with their weapon, this is great. It also can help you a lot in the laning stage, because that sustain can help you trade damage with your opponent better. And that's also the same reason why a lot of people buy this item. They essentially do, in the laning stage, these 2 items do a lot of the same thing. They essentially just make you trade out damage with your opponent better and heal back up to have more sustain. Pretty straightforward item. Also, by the way, for those who don't know, it is 28% of the damage you deal. So essentially, the more damage you deal, the more damage you will heal. Combat barrier. So recently, the barriers were buffed. They used to have only weapon damage. Now they also have fire rate. Combat barrier is very common on heroes that are not expecting to take a lot of sustained damage, but rather a little bit of burst. The first that comes to my mind are heroes like Vindicta, for instance, or Great Talon, who stay in the background and they don't need to constantly tank damage and have damage reduction. They put these barriers on and these barriers give you great stats as well. For the stats they give, they're very stat efficient, but also it means that when the shield has broken, the stat is gone. And it takes 1 minute to regenerate the shield if it's completely broken, and it takes 20 seconds to regenerate if it's taken damage. It's also very common if you pair these up with Veil Walker, because Veil Walker is an item that restores bullet and spirit shields every time you walk through a veil. And a veil are those see-through, gray, cloudy things where one side is a rainbow and the other side is completely gray. And you can only see through it from the rainbow side. Debuff Reducer. Debuff Reducer, pretty straightforward. It reduces the duration of negative effects applied to you. This is very good against anyone like Shiv, who constantly applies his dagger on you. And the thing about Shiv's dagger, for instance, is that they can stack. So he can toss a second dagger, and then if the first dagger hasn't ran out yet, then the dagger damage over time will stack and become stronger and stronger and stronger. So this item is great because by reducing the duration of negative effects applied to you, you have a much higher chance of resetting your stacks from that dagger before he throws another one. It's also great against Pocket Ult. It's also great against Infernus, who always buys Toxic Bullets and also has Afterburn. It also later on upgrades to an item that I really hate because Debuff Remover removes Bebop's bombs. So personally, I'm not a huge fan of this item, but it is extremely strong. I think if you're facing Pocket, Bebop, Infernus, any of these heroes, I think this item can always be a solid buy. You don't necessarily need to feel like it's the perfect game for Debuff Remover to buy it, because this is just a really good item to save your ass. It also removes Silence Glyph. So interestingly, Silence Glyph only silences abilities and not items. So as a bonus, you can also remove a lot of item effects that are applied to you, including Slowing Hex and Decay, Silence Glyph, Knockdown, I believe. This one also got buffed, just like Combat Barrier, to add cooldown reduction while shielded. This is a very good item on Grey Talon, for instance. I have a Grey Talon guide. You can try it if you want. It has this item in it. It's great for a lot of casters who are not supposed to be in the front line and need Spirit Power and cooldown reduction. So yeah, both these items got buffed pretty strongly. So hopefully we'll see more play with them because it's been very common to just buy these two and just be extremely tanky. Anyhow, Entering Speed, basically same explanation as Sprint Boots. It's an upgrade, pretty straightforward. It gives you more sprint speed, more health regen, more bonus health. And something that is sometimes overlooked is that it also reduces the effect of enemy movement slows. All right, Healbane. This item is extremely underrated. I think a lot of people are sleeping on this item. I think a lot of people kind of just overlook it, but 40% healing reduction whenever you're dealing spirit damage is massive. And this is something you always need to have a few of these on your team if you're playing against any heavy sustain heroes like Abrams or Shiv with Spell Lifesteal, Infernus. And this is a case of making sure you look at the items the enemies have too, so you can expect what's to come. If you see that they buy Leech, you instantly buy Healbane. You instantly buy Healbane because it counters a huge part of Leech. And second of all, for those who are more weapon damage oriented carries, then maybe you would have problems with applying a Healbane continuously because you're not doing that much spirit damage or that regularly. Well, then you can combine this with Toxic Bullets, because Toxic Bullets also adds a healing debuff, but it also adds a 5% health per second bleed that is spirit damage. In other words, Toxic Bullets plus Healbane is like the holy grail of healing reduction combos, and they both work by just shooting at the enemy. As soon as you've applied Toxic Bullets, you've also applied Healbane. So highly recommend getting those two items together if you have a decent weapon build, and definitely get Healbane. I also forgot to mention that Healbane also heals you on a hero kill. So if you're playing a hero that you know can burst someone down quickly, this can also help you get a lot of sustain in team fights, because by just applying spirit damage to a hero, if they die, they also get healed and back up. Healing Booster. This item recently got changed a bit to not only increase the effectiveness of your healing, but also increases your resistance to healing reduction. Now that used to be on Leech, but they slightly nerfed Leech because the meta was extremely regen, health, lifesteal focused. So now they lowered the amount and added it onto Healing Booster instead. It's extremely strong, not only for support heroes. So for instance, if you play Kelvin with his Dome can heal, his Frost Grenade can heal, he usually buys Rescue Beam. It also works on Dynamo's heal. This item can be bought by a lot of heroes. Even I buy it on Lash because his Flog does healing. And also I have a Spirit Lifesteal from Divine Kevlar and this Spirit Lifesteal item. So this item is bought by a lot of hero actually. It used to have bullet resistance as well, but now it's got resistance to healing reduction instead. Healing reduction is stacked multiplicatively. So for instance, if you have 40 plus 40%, it's not 80, but it's like whatever that math piece is, something like 60 or 70. Meaning that if you want to reduce all the healing they do, you would have to buy Healbane, Toxic Bullets, and apply Decay. Then they will basically not heal at all. Okay, reactive barrier. This item recently got nerfed a lot, but I still believe that this is one of the best items in the game. This item is an insta-buy if you play against Wraith, Bebop, Lash, Haze, Abrams, Mo and Krill, and probably many others as well. Essentially what this one does is, because there are so many abilities in this game that makes you not able to control your hero, because you're stunned, slept, whatever, this item saves your ass. And I can't stress how many times I've won a lane against Wraith, because, yeah guys, and this is something to remember guys, you have to track their soul counts. So when a Wraith hits 3,000 souls, she has her ult. So you know that she's going to look for a kill because she has one of the strongest kill potentials on level 6. At level 6, sorry, that's from a different game. At 3,000 souls. So what does this tell you? This tells you that if you're planning ahead, you need to make sure that you already bought a reactive barrier by the time the Wraith in your lane hits 3,000 souls, because she's going to go for a kill instantly. And you know what happens is she ults you and you don't take damage. You literally do not take damage. Unless she has someone else with her, she will not kill you. So don't sleep on this item. Buy it. It's going to save your laning stage. It's only 1250. And this is one of the few times where I would skip a lot of the tier 1 items and rush reactive barrier. Because if you're getting pinned against the wall by Abrams, or if you're getting Wraith ulted or slept by Haze, there are so many situations where this item will save your ass. Next up, we have Spirit Armor. Not much to say about that. Same as Bullet Armor, just for purple damage. Be upgraded to this one. One thing that is interesting is that there are a few heroes that have built-in resistances. So one of them being a Bebop. It doesn't even say it here, but his bullet resistance actually scales with his ability power level. So later in the game, he has like 40 bullet resistance, like innate by default. So what this means is that, for instance, when I make guides for Bebop, I almost never recommend buying bullet armor unless you're taking extreme amounts of bullet damage. He already has that built in. So this is also something to have in mind, is like, do my items or my hero already give me some sort of resistance? So always look at the tooltips and look at the bottom left how much armor, like spirit and bullet armor, you have before you make the decision if you should buy one or both. But as a general rule of thumb, just buying both of these ones is usually going to help you tank up a lot, because it's also going to increase your base health by 14% for each one. All right, next up is Spirit Lifesteal. This item is bought by so many heroes that I can't even mention them all, but it's great on anyone that deals significant spirit damage. It's a must buy on Infernus. Most Shiv builds have it. I use it for my Lash guide, a Lash build. Not everybody does it for him. Especially for any hero that applies a lot of constant pressure, like Infernus's damage over time, or Pocket's ult, or Shiv's dagger. This can help you get so much sustain. Like, you'll be able to stay in the fight for so much longer. And that is when we need to buy this item. But yeah, pretty straightforward, not too much to say about it. But yeah, really good item nonetheless. I also buy this in my bomb Bebop, just because when you later on do like 1,000 to 2,000 damage and bomb explosions, you get back like 500 health each time. Okay, next up we have Divine Barrier. This is another item that I think is slept on a lot. Which also is because I think that you guys are in general scared of active items because you're scared of forgetting to use them, or you're scared of using them at the wrong time, or just because it's very overwhelming when you're playing a new game that has this many features, this many characters and items and abilities, to also have to think about when to use your active items. But I promise you, your games will go much better once you start getting used to using active items. Just start with one, get comfortable with the keybind, and then keep on going until you can eventually play with 4. Divine Barrier is interestingly a support item, but can be also used on yourself. So for instance, I've seen so Warden, for instance, is a hero that plays a lot of movement speed builds. He goes for like all these crazy like Fleet Foot and Heroic Aura and Sprint Boots and stuff. So I've seen some Wardens also go for Divine Barrier because he just wants to run his opponents down while popping his ult. And because this lasts for 5 seconds, gives you shields and also gives you movement speed, this is a great item for a lot of situations. And because you can cast it on others and yourself, it can be used both as a carry but also as a support. And once again, don't forget to look at the passive stats at the top. Extra sprint speed, extra ability range, all of these things are great stats. So always make sure that when you're buying an active item that you're also reading the passive stats above it. All right, next up is Health Nova. This item is really good. We've recently kind of reached a meta where people are more used to embracing not only a carry role but also a support role. I've seen some extremely strong Kelvin builds, Ivy builds that have insane amounts of healing, and Health Nova does more healing for each ally within the radius. Now imagine if your entire team has this, you can heal so much. So this is definitely an item that you can buy on a lot of heroes. I think you can even buy it just as just to help yourself sustain too. Kind of in the same boat as like a little bit stronger healing, right? But yeah, it can be pretty big in team fights. It also gives you weapon damage. So yeah, good item overall. It's kind of fun to use. So for instance, one thing you can do when you play support is that you rescue beam someone who's low and you pull them back to you and then you instantly pop Health Nova. So now you're healing them for 30% of their max health plus another 260 plus another 20% per ally nearby. So yeah, good item. Also, don't forget that all of these items get boosted by Healing Booster too. So whenever you're focusing on a support build, this item should always be included because not only does it boost your abilities, but also your healing items. Next up, we have Restorative Locket. This item has gotten nerfed already, but it's still very strong. It is the equivalent of a magic stick from Dota, for those who play that game, and essentially just collects charges from abilities cast nearby. And you can use this at any time you want to heal yourself or an ally. And it also replenishes a stamina point on the target when it's got max stacks. It used to replenish your entire stamina bar when it had max stacks, and that's why it was really broken on Lash. But it's still a really good item. I still think this is a situational item depending on how much you think you'll be within 50 meters range from your enemy, and also how spammable are your enemy's abilities. So for instance, a hero like Lady Geist, she spams her 3 a lot because it's got a short cooldown. You have a lot of other heroes that spam abilities too. So any hero that can like spam low cooldown abilities, this item will go up in value. So that is also something to bear in mind, that when you're laning against a hero, you're like, okay, how many spells are these guys actually going to be spamming in the next few minutes, or in general in this game in a team fight? How likely is it that I can regularly build up stacks really well on Restorative Locket? And it also gives a little bit of spirit power and spirit resistance. So definitely another item that is good overall and can be, once again, because it can both be self-cast and cast on allies, you can use it both as a support and a healer. And then we have Return Fire. This item is definitely not bought enough. I think this item is stronger than you think. So basically, automatically fire a bullet towards any attacker who damages you with their abilities or weapon. This is kind of like the Blade Mail from Dota 2. It is very strong to buy on any hero that can tank a lot of damage. For instance, Abrams, maybe Shiv, most tanks, or anyone who like gets in the fray. Mo and Krill, it could be great on as well. It also boosts their fire rate, actually, of all things. But the interesting thing here is that it returns a percentage of the bullet damage you receive and a percentage of the spirit damage you receive. So I've seen some really funny builds where you play Kelvin, you buy Return Fire and Alchemical Fire, and then you just pop Alchemical Fire and Return Fire inside your dome. And then whoever stands in the dome will not only take spirit damage, but they will also have increased bullet damage taken. So when they shoot at you, not only are you returning their fire back to them, they're also taking in another 40% extra damage because of the Alchemical Fire. I think the biggest concern, I guess, is that I think Vitality items are one of the most contested slots, because it is extremely hard to play this game unless you tank up a little bit, because there's a lot of crowd control. It's easy to be out of position. There's a lot of stuff that can almost instantly kill you, which means that you're always gonna be buying either spirit or bullet armor or some sort of combat barrier. So that combined with the fact that this is also pretty much the main category where you find items like lifesteal, it is hard to find space to put in an item like this. And that is why it's obviously a little bit niche. But in the right situations, it's a really good item. Next up, we have the 3000 souls category. And first out is Fortitude. Fortitude is a pretty interesting item that not only gives you a chunk of bonus health, it makes you deal more weapon damage and increases your movement speed when you're above 75% health. Also, after not taking damage for 11 seconds, you gain 4% max health regen. So this item works really well with barrier builds, so Enchanter's Barrier, Combat Barrier. And that is because when you have a big barrier, it means that even, let's say you have a 300 bullet shield, and then you take 300 damage. Well, now your health is still at 100%. So that means that you're technically gaining a bigger value out of this damage threshold where the buff is active, because the damage is already going to break your shields first, meaning that your health is still above the 75% health threshold. So this item works pretty well together with barriers. It also increases your movement speed, so it's also common on, you can buy it on anyone who wants to run fast like Warden, McGinnis. Honestly, if you want to roam a lot, this is a good item. I think another reason why it's a good item for roaming is you can gank a lane, you can be in a team fight, and then you leave the lane, and then because 11 seconds after taking damage, you start healing rapidly back up, you can instantly go to another lane and be oppressive again without having to go back and heal. So yeah, good item. And then we have the same here. This is improved bullet and spirit armor. Not much to say about these. They're just upgrades of these two. Should probably buy these more often than you think. It allows you to play more aggressive. And I just think with the amount of crowd control that is in this game, that you should always tank up more than you think. There's very few heroes that can get away with being a full glass cannon. And I think you'll just have a more enjoyable time playing the game if you don't have 900 health like 30 minutes into the game. Next up is Lifestrike. This item is bought on a lot of Abrams builds. It's an upgrade of melee lifesteal, like I mentioned earlier. It does the same but better. It increases your melee damage, it gives you bullet resists, it heals you a lot. But interestingly, it also gives a 60% movement slow with a 2.5 second slow duration. And because it's a 5 second cooldown, it's technically a 50% uptime as long as you melee your enemy. It also means that every 5 seconds you can also heal for that amount. And when you're later into the game and you have very high melee damage, because melee damage also scales with weapon damage, a hero like Abrams can heal massively every 5 seconds with this item. So yeah, very strong item and bought on a lot of heroes. Any hero that wants to go for a melee build, you'll always find Lifestrike as the centerpiece in that build. I've seen some Shivs play it too, even some Lash builds with Lifestrike. Not a huge fan of that one, but it's definitely possible. So yeah, I think also in general, it's a lot of fun to experiment with different builds like this. You can try a melee build on any hero if you want. It's not always going to work well, but it's just fun to try something new. Also, one thing to be wary of is that when you start to play against better players, they can read when you're trying to go for a melee and they can try to parry you. And when they parry you and you get stunned, you will probably not want to melee again for a while. So that's also something to have in mind, because if you successfully parry someone, you can instantly parry again. But if you miss your parry, it now goes on a 5 or 6 second cooldown, I believe, meaning that anyone who messes up their parry are gonna get punched to death afterwards. That is why when I play with Flats, he always starts laughing and he goes, "Someone missed their parry, someone missed their parry," because then he knows he can just punch them as much as he wants. It's also really good on Viscous, because Viscous, they recently changed his punch ability to now do melee damage instead of spirit damage. So that also works on his punch. Another ability that triggers a Lifestrike is Uppercut from Bebop, because it's considered a light melee attack. Okay, next up we have Superior Stamina, which is an upgrade from Extra Stamina. This is an extremely good item on Lashed. You have more air control. Your air jumps and your dashes go longer. And this is the big one, the passive, where you can increase the amount of air dashes and air jumps from 1 to 2, changes like the entire dynamic of playing Lash drastically, because it allows you to do so much more air control. I even buy it on my double bomb bebop just to get away. After I put 2 bombs on someone, then I just want to get out of there. Then this one can help me escape. It's also really good on Vindicta, especially because she only has 2 stamina bars, and she's also the type of hero that if she has no stamina left, she's dead. She's very squishy, and she needs to get out of there as soon as possible if someone jumps her. So yeah, this item recently got nerfed, but it's still one of the strongest items in the game and can, in theory, be bought on any hero as long as you're looking for more mobility. So this is also where your decision making comes in, where what do you want when you make your own build? Because like I mentioned earlier, I truly believe that a lot of you can learn a lot from following guides in the beginning, but I also think you should all get to a point where you want to develop your own playstyle and then adjust after that. Because I don't think there's any 100% right and wrong. Of course, some people have figured out that these items have a higher win rate and whatnot. But as a general rule of thumb, I think that whatever fits your playstyle is what's going to be best for you. So follow guides, but don't follow them blindly. Have some critical thinking to like, is this item actually good for the way I play this hero? All right, Veil Walker. Like I mentioned earlier, this item is great with barrier builds. It increases your bullet and spirit shield a lot. And walking through a cosmic veil grants you stealth, increased movement speed, restores all bullet and spirit shields, and grants bonus fire rate for the next magazine. So here is something that is interesting about the Veil Walker. A lot of people think that this is a bad item because the invisibility only lasts for 5 seconds. But here's the thing, the actual buff lasts for as long as you don't reload. As far as I know, there is no duration on the buff. It only says that it's a 17-second cooldown on running through the veil, which restores your shields. So if you roam a lot and you buy these barriers and stuff, and you run through veils regularly, not only do you go invisible, you run faster, and your next clip will fire faster. So even if you're not invisible anymore, you still get the 30% extra fire rates on your next clip. So that's something to have in mind, that it can give you some extra burst damage when you're about to engage in a fight, as long as you don't reload. All right, and then we have debuff remover. As I mentioned earlier, I really hate this item because it messes with my bomb builds. I have to end up buying curse so people can't easily remove the bombs, but super good item overall. I think some people are not aware of how many debuffs you can actually remove. Like silencing glyph and pocket ult, infernus burn, toxic bullets, decay. So many uses for this item, and I think we're gonna see this item being bought a lot more the better people get at the game and the more guides come out and stuff. I just think this is an awesome item. I'm also one of those people who do not buy this enough, because not only does it reduce the duration of all negative effects, but also the fact that you can purge anything except stun and sleep because you're not able to control or cast anything. And it also gives you 3 meters per second movement speed. You can get out of almost anything. Majestic Leap. This is a really cool item. Together with Warpstone, this is one of those 2 items that can really change your mobility by a lot. You can jump high up in the air, you fly up in the air, and you can also reactivate it to land. And the cool thing is, I'm not sure if you guys knew this, but when you use your landing for Majestic Leap, as long as you didn't jump before you Majestic leapt, you can actually jump again before you land. And what this does is that it takes a lot of the downwards momentum with you into a forward momentum. I actually want to show you guys. So here we have Majestic Leap. So the normal usage of Majestic Leap is like jump up, and then you can press it again to land. See, the issue with that is that you lose all your momentum. But you can do this. See how I double jumped like slightly before I landed, and then my momentum carries with me. And this can give you a lot more mobility. I do wonder if I double jump first, can I still do it? I want to check. Yeah, see? Now I couldn't do it. So that's why it's important that you can only do this if you don't double jump before you cast your Majestic Leap because you're technically in the air all the time, and unless you have superior stamina, you can only do one air jump. So yeah, really cool item, very popular on Pocket. I personally think that you don't need it on Lash and that it's just a kind of cop-out for not having good enough positioning because there are so many items you could buy for 3,000. Because here's the thing, Majestic Leap does basically not work in combat because you cannot use it for 5 seconds if attacked by an enemy hero. So what this means is that if you're not using this item to initiate the fight, it's technically 3,000 souls spent on nothing more than 10 spirit power and 125 bonus health. It's also very popular on Bebop if you play the ult build where you jump up in the sky and ult, and same goes for 7. But what's both of these builds have in common is that the higher up you get in the difficulty levels, and the better people get, the less likely you are to see a Majestic Leap 7 or a Majestic Leap Bebop. Because it's a lot easier to counter higher up with items like knockdown or just simply hiding because you're expecting and you just don't fight in the open because of it. But yeah, so Majestic Leap is definitely an item that is bought on a lot of heroes. You also can buy it on Dynamo, even though I think Warpstone is still better on Dynamo because he also will be in a lot of situations where he can use it to get out as well. Metal Skin, another example of an item that is heavily underrated. This item can save you from getting killed by Haze ult. And here's the interesting part. A lot of people buy different items to get saved by Haze ult. You can buy Metal Skin, you can also buy Ethereal Shift. And the funny thing is that once Haze gets her Silencer, so a common combination is that Haze players will buy Ricochet and then Silencer. So what this does is that when she does her ult where she just spins around and damages everybody nearby, you also cannot use abilities to get away. And that makes Metal Skin and Ethereal Shift even stronger because silence does not affect items, only abilities. So if you're playing as a Haze who's really fed, highly recommend considering getting Metal Skin and Ethereal Shift. If you want advice on which one you should buy of these two since they cost the same, there's a few things to take into consideration. One of them is that this one makes you immune to everything, but you cannot move. This one makes you immune to bullets and melee, but you can move. And another thing to consider is what item slots are more contested for me. Am I a very spirit-focused build? Then maybe it would be better to use a vitality slot for it, and so forth. Because, for instance, there are some builds where there simply is no more space for another item in this category. Then you would have to look at the closest thing you can get from another category. So this is just simply about how you want to play your hero, and yeah, they can both save you from a lot of different situations. And this is also where you have to assess what other heroes are in the lobby. So you have to ask yourself, in what situations is Metal Skin good in for this team? So you have to assess, you have to look at the power level of each of the enemy heroes and assess whether or not Metal Skin or Ethereal Shift is better in these cases. Rescue Beam, extremely strong item, can be upgraded from Healing Right. So, and a lot of people buy this anyway for the laning stage. It's very strong. This item basically connects you to a hero and the range is massive, 45 meters, and it heals 30% of both of your health for 2.5 seconds. This is a channel, which means that it can be interrupted if they go outside the range or if you get stunned. And the cool thing is that if you reactivate the ability, you pull them towards you. So that is also why you can do cool stuff like, for instance, Kelvin can pull people in, and then he can dome instantly because his dome will heal you back up to full when it's maxed almost instantly. Very, very much a core item on anyone who's planning to play support/healing. And is one of the few items that can save a teammate out of pretty much anything. This is just an item that more people need to buy. You can also save people from Bebop hooks, but you didn't hear that from me. If someone gets hooked, you can click Rescue Beam on them and it cancels the hook. Now we're at the pricey 6,300 Vitality items, and these are some good items. In my opinion, I think that Vitality luxury items are probably the most impactful luxury items in the game. You have Inhibitor, which is the only item that directly reduces your damage output and also constantly slows. And this stacks with slowing bullets as well as Mystic Slows. If you have Mystic Slow, slowing bullets, and Inhibitor, they cannot shoot, they cannot move, their fire rate's gone, their damage is gone. They're just not having a good time. Because it doesn't specify, but I'm fairly sure that this is both spirit and weapon damage, because it doesn't specify. It just says targets outgoing damage. So I'm gonna assume that that's, I haven't bought this item that often, but I'm gonna assume that that's both spirit and weapon damage, which is quite massive. All right, then we have Leech. This item recently got changed a bit. It used to have the resistance to healing reduction that is now moved to healing booster and reduced accordingly because it's a cheaper item, but it still is an insanely good item. It's one of the first big items you buy on Infernus, for instance. A lot of people buy it on Shiv, and yeah, this item is insane. As soon as you see this item, it is your cue to buy Healbane and Toxic Bullets, and also most likely Decay. Ideally, you want to have all three, at least on your team, not necessarily all on you, but you want to have as much healing debuffs as possible, because Leech increases your survivability a lot. 7 also buys this. 7 is a really good hybrid carry. He does a lot of spirit and bullet damage, so this one is just greatly strengthening his survivability. These two can also be bought on Wraith. I've seen some builds that buy both Leech and Inhibitor on Wraith, and it makes her really hard to kill because when she activates her 3, I believe, she also gets a bonus spirit damage from her bullets. So this item is just overall really strong. Okay, next up is Soul Rebirth. Now this item is ridiculous. This item resurrects you at your death location after 4 seconds if you die, with a 200-second cooldown. And not only that, it also increases spirit power, weapon damage, and cooldown reduction. Now, interestingly, the game puts a yellow icon under the health bar of heroes that have Soul Rebirth ready, so that you know that if you kill them, they're gonna rest. So there's actually they actually have an active UI solution so that it's gonna be harder to miss. But I have definitely been in situations where I've killed someone, I'm like, yeah, I killed him. And then he just comes back to life and I completely forgot that it had Soul Rebirth. Interesting also, by the way, if you guys didn't know, item cooldowns and durations and all those things are also affected by other items. So I know it says a 200 cooldown on Soul Rebirth right now, but if you buy this item plus a lot of other items with cooldown reduction, even though the cooldown reduction is technically aimed towards lowering your abilities cooldowns, it also affects how long the cooldown is off your Soul Rebirth. And that's also something to have in mind if you're playing a build with a lot of active items. So sometimes I play the one button bebop with Phantom Strike and stuff, and Shadow Weave maybe. And then if you buy Superior Cooldown, it also reduces all those items cooldowns by 24% as well. So yeah, this item is really insane, and it's kind of funny to compare because in Dota, when you kill Roshan, the big boss, he drops an Aegis, and that Aegis can be picked up by one player, and they will have, with the next 5 minutes, they have one Resurrect available. And here anyone can just buy it as an item with a 200-second cooldown. So this item is insane. Big issue with Soul Rebirth is that, okay, let's say that someone kills you with some burst damage. But if they see that you're resurrecting, they're all ready for you. And if you're like in a 4v1 or something, it's not going to matter. You're just going to resurrect and they're just going to kill you again. But with someone that is like extremely slippery, like Lash, who can instantly grapple, and he can grapple into a flog that might heal you back up to max. A really strong ability. Colossus. I don't see this item being bought a lot, and I always wonder why. Because I feel like this item is really strong. It gives you 600 health. It gives you much more melee and weapon damage, and it increases the bullet and spirit resists for 7 seconds. And one thing that I find really interesting is that it also slows the movement and dash speeds of enemies nearby. So it's also going to be harder to escape from you. That's also why I wonder if it's like really good on Viscous and maybe Abrams. And I also do wonder if it actually means that your hitbox is bigger too. So because if your hitbox is bigger, it means that when you're playing Viscous, the ball will be bigger, so it's easier to stun people. And I also wonder, I'm pretty sure also with Abrams, it's also gonna technically increase his melee range. So Let's try to buy Colossus. That's the max range. Now we're no longer hitting him. Colossus?
Colossus!
Ah, it doesn't change. Next up we have Phantom Strike. This item is really cool. It's one of my favorite items in the game actually. And not only does it give bullet resist, weapon damage, but it teleports you to an enemy target, applying disarm, slow, and dealing damage. Now the spirit damage here scales with how much spirit power you have. So this item is extremely strong on Mo and Krill, for instance, because he needs gap closing so he can lock a hero down with his ult. It's also pretty good on Abrams, for those who play like the pin attack build, or any shotgun hero too. Like you can use it on Shiv too. Some people even use it on Pocket. It's also very common on Viscous. Interesting thing about Phantom Strike on Viscous is that when Viscous is rolling around in his ball, you don't have that much control of his direction. But you can, let's say you miss a target, you roll past them, you can instantly Phantom Strike that target, which means that it like resets the direction of your ball. And not only that, but it also guarantees that your ball will roll over them and stun them. So Phantom Strike plus Viscous means that you can do insane burst damage because you're guaranteed to hit them with Phantom Strike and roll over them, which means that you can also hit them with a punch or whatever goo combo you want to do. You have to have your ult on level 5 though. That's the only time you can use items. I also use Phantom Strike when I want to get silly with my one button bebop. I do that sometimes if I play against Vindicta and Grey Talon and I struggle to catch them because they're playing very far back. Shadow Weave. Shadow Weave is an item that I think a lot of people don't even know exists because any hero can actually go invisible in this game. Not just for 5 seconds with the Veil Walker, but for 25 seconds. So this is similar to Haze's stealth, but the cool thing is that you have an 8-second window where you have 40% increased fire rates and 55 extra spirit power. You also move at 2 meters per second faster while sprinting, and it's got a 45-second cooldown. And there's also a pretty big chunk of ammo and spirit shield and 15 health regen. Don't overlook 15 health regen. That is a lot. So I think this item is something that will be more important when you get into more tougher games where target priority is more important, because your enemies are going to learn to play more around positioning. So for instance, I sometimes bought this item because there was always this one hero that didn't buy a lot of armor. So he's playing very far back and very safe and always makes sure that his team is between us and him. So you can use this item to try to go through off angles. You can run through their jungles or run through buildings and stuff and basically attack from an angle they're not expecting. And it's also just an incredibly fun item to use because like why wouldn't it be fun to go invisible? You have to bear in mind though, it's very expensive. It's 6,300, but I do feel like because there's an ambush buff that gives you spirit power and fire rate, that also kind of makes up for how pricey it is. So it's not a dead item. Like you still do more damage even when buying this item, because the whole idea of this item is to be someone that gets in there, fights for 8 seconds, and then gets out. And then finally we have Unstoppable. This item is bought very often in sweaty games. It makes you, as the title says, unstoppable for 6 seconds. This is a crucial item to buy on heroes like Seven and Lash, especially in games where there's a lot of crowd control. So yeah, and bear in mind you can increase the duration of these ones with duration extender too. So when you play Seven, for instance, and you go for that ult build, you always want to jump up and you want to unstoppable first before popping your ult, because any team's instant reaction as soon as Seven ults is to either hide or hook him down and kill him. So yeah, if you're struggling with staying alive in fights and you feel like you're getting stun locked a lot, it's like Mo and Krill, and there's Dynamo ults and there's Wraith ults and so on, consider buying Unstoppable. Because if you sometimes have like an extremely strong damage combo, but you're struggling with pulling it off, then this item can help you to be able to make the decisions that you want to make in a team fight. It helps more than you think. I buy it quite often on Lash because it's really annoying when you're about to land a 4-man ult and then you get slept or hooked or whatever. Another really good item. So yeah, that was the Vitality items explained. We'll be back tomorrow for Spirit items, which will be the final episode of the 3-piece every item explained in Deadlock. I hope you guys enjoyed this content. Don't forget to leave a comment down below what your favorite item was and what you want me to make in future videos. And don't forget to subscribe as well. And I'll see you in the next video. Ciao.